Caroline Leavitt just handed Jerome Powell a mental picture that is going to live rent-free in his head forever. Go ahead, see for yourself.
But unfortunately, we have interest rates that are still too high. So the president sent this note to the Fed chair.
So the president slid a note over to the Fed chair today, piling on the Trump team's pressure campaign to chop interest rates. Caroline showed up armed and ready, but barely a day later, Powell clapped back, throwing shade straight at Trump's tariffs.
But, Chair, would the Fed have cut more by now if it weren't for the tariffs?
So I think that's right. In effect, we went on hold when we saw the size of the tariff.
So I think that is right. We, in effect, went on hold when we saw the size of the tariffs. That is why today we are unpacking this whole circus, because we are not here to wave pom-poms for any party. We are here to dish out a little thing called common sense. So if you have got a brain that likes to freelance, smash that subscribe button and let's dive in.
The president has consistently stated the American economy is booming, and there were so many economic analysts who said that this president's policies would drive our economy down, when in fact we have seen the opposite. We've seen a massive deregulation campaign take place. We've seen inflation completely diminished from where it was under the reckless spending and the bad policies of the previous incompetent administration. I would remind the Fed chair, and I would remind the entire world, that this is a president who was a businessman first, and he knows what he is doing. He has a proven economic formula that worked in his first term as president, and it is working again. The one problem that remains is high interest rates for the American people. The American people want to borrow money cheaply, and they should be able to do that.
Aside from immigration, the economy has been one of Trump's biggest bragging rights so far. Sure, his tariff adventures gave Wall Street a few mood swings, but when you zoom in on the actual numbers, a lot of that media panic looks more like clickbait than catastrophe. Take this. Just a few days ago, the New York Fed dropped a press release saying inflation expectations tick down short-term, stay flat medium, and long-term. Job loss worries are down, spending dips a bit, but household income expectations are up. Those are solid receipts that things are not unraveling the way the doom and gloom headlines would have you think. And let us be real, if Biden had those same stats, the mainstream media would have thrown him a week-long victory parade. That is exactly why Caroline rolled in with a chart like a teacher catching Powell without his homework.
But unfortunately, we have interest rates that are still too high. So the president sent this note to the Fed chair today. And if you look at this chart, this is a chart of all of the interest rates of many countries throughout the world are all paying lower interest rates than the United States of America, which has one of the hottest and strongest economies in the world. The president sent this note to the Fed chair. It says, Jerome, you are as usual too late. You have cost the USA a fortune and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost, and there is no inflation. And the president is right. There is historically low inflation thanks to his policies. And we will continue to drive down the cost of living in this country for Americans. We will continue to deregulate.
The latest push to cut interest rates really boils down to one simple pitch: cheaper loans for everyone, which could give the economy a nice caffeine shot. But here is the catch: them too early. And inflation might come back like that unwanted sequel nobody asked for. That exact tug of war was the headline act at last month's Fed meeting. Sure, most policymakers nodded along to the idea of some cuts, but they parked it in the let's just stalk this situation a little longer category. Jerome Powell even took the same script to Portugal at the European Central Bank's forum, where he basically said, relax, we are not speed running this decision.
The U.S. economy is in a pretty good position. Inflation has come down close to 2%. We're at 2.3 headline, 2.7 core.
Chair, would the Fed have cut more by now if it weren't for the tariffs?
So I think that's right. In effect, we went on hold when we saw the size of the tariffs, and essentially all inflation forecasts for the United States went up materially as a consequence of the tariffs. So we didn't overreact. In fact, we didn't react at all. We're simply taking some time. As long as the U.S. economy is in solid shape, we think the prudent thing to do is to wait and learn more and see what those effects might be. And again, they haven't really shown up. So for now, we're waiting.
That is a fair point. But here is the twist. Even the countries taking the hardest punches from Trump's tariffs were busy slashing their Own interest rates, CNN even reported it. The European Central Bank, the Bank of Mexico, and a few others have been trimming their benchmark rates like it's haircut season. Meanwhile, the Fed's still sitting in the waiting room. So while other economies are loosening up to stay competitive and dodge slowdowns, the U.S. is basically tapping its foot, which begs the question, is this genuine caution or just political theater with better lighting? That is exactly where Caroline jumped in, doubling down. With this,
outlined Jerome Powell and the note that the president just sent to him. There are many who believe that Powell has been politicized in a lot of different ways. The president has not been shy about acting on things that he believes in. Why not just fire Jerome Powell and put in somebody that is going to lower rates? Why wait?
Well, it's a good question and one you can ask the president because that's a decision for him to make. But you're right to point out the politicization of the Fed, and it's very unfortunate for our country. But Jerome Powell cut rates numerous times ahead of the election when Joe Biden was in this Oval Office, but now he refuses to, and the economy is in a much better place. So there really isn't a good explanation for that, and the president is rightfully calling attention to it.
although the Fed is supposed to be the independent referee of the economy, some folks saw Jerome's tariff remarks as more of a political jab than a neutral call. And honestly, they have blurred that line before case in point. Back in 2020, they rewrote their mission statement, shifting from inflation first to jobs first, with a whole lot of inclusive language sprinkled in. Powell even admitted that racial gaps in unemployment were part of the motivation. Now maybe it is, just me, but monetary policy should be about boosting the economy for everyone, not about racking up points for activism or virtue signaling. And speaking of points, Trump has been keeping score. He has turned up the volume on his criticism of Jay, even tossing out public calls for his resignation.
Jerome Powell, who you've been pressuring to lower interest rates, he's facing accusations of lying to Congress, which is a potential crime about the opulent.
Well, then he should resign immediately. We should get somebody in there that's going to lower interest rates.
Do you want congressional
Why don't you call for his
Republicans
resignation?
do you want congressional Republicans to investigate and
It's
pursue
okay with
punish-
me. I think he's terrible. I think, look, we're paying, I call him Too Late. T-O-O, Too Late, like Too Tall Jones for the Dallas Cowboys, right? Too late. He's always late. But he wasn't late with Biden before the election. He was cutting him like crazy. It didn't help too much, did it? But he was cutting him like crazy before the election with Kamala.
This is not the first time Jerome Powell has had to deal with this kind of pressure. You might remember back in 2019 when Trump's public frustration was at a fever pitch. There was constant speculation about Powell's job. When he was asked directly if he would resign if the president asked, his answer was clear and to the point.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
These comments get especially juicy for two big reasons. First, they look a lot like a nudge, okay? More like a shove for supposedly independent policymakers to fall in line with the president's playbook, even if they do not buy in. Second, the Supreme Court already ruled back in May that Trump cannot just boot Jerome Powell on a whim. That is why some analysts are whispering that the administration might be laying the groundwork, either cooking up a legal loophole to oust him or turning up the heat until Powell throws in the towel himself. But what do you think? Is this a high-stakes chess match or just political theater with better popcorn?